Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey, everybody, it's Jared. I'm telling you right now, I am pissed. I don't know about the rest of you, but I am tired of reading stories from, it doesn't matter where it is, from New York, from Tulsa, from California, about another illegal alien that has murdered or raped or assaulted a U.S. citizen. I don't know about you, but I am just right there. And I just can't understand how the folks in Washington, D.C. just seem to just be like, oh, whatever. It's just another incident, just another person. They don't even name the victims. And I don't know. Oh, man, I'm trying to get this across where I'm like, oh, man, how do we even discuss this without just completely losing it? So,
yeah. The problem with this, Jared, is there's no accountability. There's zero accountability. And for a criminal, that's what they're going to do. Just think about it. If you can go out and ride a dirt bike and not have a license plate, or as those guys have the will run on the back of those speed bikes and take off. And if that's just a car, if you can do that as a person and come in and not have an accountability, you can do what happened to Rachel Morin or any number of our victims that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I'm telling you, I'm going through this permit process for this, shop that I want to build on the back of my property. And I'm telling you, just with my own city here in Utah, just trying to get the permit process to build something on my own property, I have to go through these massive, loopholes. And it's a pretty small incident compared to, a lot of this stuff. And yet these other illegal immigrants, they come across here into our land, uninvited, and then do these heinous crimes. Okay, well, we'll get into this, but hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. Just want to welcome you in, and you can tell that we're kind of fired up, and we're already into this. But while we're here, definitely go down there and smash that subscribe and the bell, and share the episode, and definitely appreciate all of you out there. But and I guess I should apologize, but I really don't want to, because frankly, as an American citizen, I'm just fed up. You know what? You cannot do what is happening in the United States in any other country. Go to like, some of these men that we're talking about that raped, the guy that raped Rachel Morin here. He's from El Salvador, I think, or, and there's another one from Ecuador. There's some from Venezuela. Go to those countries and go rape one of their citizens and see what happens. Break into, one of these countries uninvited and demand that they give you food and shelter, and then abuse their citizens and see what happens. Go to China and just walk into China and see what happens. You are going to be, you'll be in prison so fast, your head will spin. And yet in the United States, these people are just operating almost without impunity. And, frankly, I'm just tired of it. So Tom, I don't know about you, but I was reading this morning, and the latest headline that I just read is about a young girl, 12 years old. Her name's Jocelyn Nungary, and she was raped and murdered by 2 Venezuelan illegal immigrants. And that's just the latest of them. We've also got the Lake and Riley story. That story sends me over the edge too. It's like, how is this guy? They catch him in New York. He assaulted somebody in New York. Then he goes down to Georgia. He gets a job. He's not even he's not even here legally, and yet he murders Lake and Riley. We just read about this, in New York City, this guy from Ecuador holds a knife to a 13-year-old girl in the middle of the day and rapes her in a park. And fortunately, they caught him. And frankly, that dude's lucky to be alive, because when the New
Mm-hmm.
Yorkers caught him, man, that was a bad day
Yeah,
for
it could have been a
him.
Richard Ramirez deal where they did administer a little street justice. If you recall, the Night Stalker back in the when he was captured back in the 80s, 90s. Yeah, could have been just like that, and real quick. And people are getting angry, quite honestly.
Yeah.
If I had to get an assessment on it, Jared, the amount of shootings that taking place rather than just road rage, they're shooting each other and everything else. So people are seething because of this. And what it comes down to is we formulate an agreement in the United States, and that's called the law. And we adhere to the law, and everybody does. If it's simply your shed or workshop you're building in the back, we adhere to it. But there's certain folks that seem to come over and want to exploit that. And what happens is there's a strong tipping point, and it takes a while to get to it, but people finally get tired of this. And so what you see now is they're seething. They're tired of seeing their entire neighborhood going to pot, and they're beating this guy up and everything else. So let's hope we can hold it together and we stop with all this madness that's happening out on the road and everything else, because people do not feel validated. They don't feel like they're getting their day in court and they're being treated fairly when everyone's waiting online. And then we're seeing examples of this, and this heinous example right now. And as long as I'm on a roll on it, let's talk about it for a second. Our offender who was captured, who raped and murdered Rachel, and I'm not even going to name him on here, but my understanding is from a Tulsa press release was he was wanted for homicide down in El Salvador. This is insane. If this guy was wanted down here and he came across our border, and I think we were speaking earlier, he's been stopped a couple of times. Like, how did we not get onto this? And before I say all that, and we just make it go for it, man.
Tom, it's incredible that according to the timeline that I've read, the guy murdered somebody in Ecuador. He murders a lady in Ecuador. He probably raped her too. And within a month, he's in the United States. So this guy not only evades his own justice down there in Ecuador. So yeah, this guy is basically caught twice at the Border Patrol coming through the ports of entry. They kick him back. They send him back to Mexico. Said you can't come in. I don't know why the red flags didn't, hit enough with Border Patrol. Probably because they're so restricted right now. But and then the guy, just comes through the border somewhere where it's not guarded well, and he's considered one of those 2 million gotaways. And now he ends up in California first, I believe, and that's where he assaulted that mom and her kid, and that's where they've got the video of him actually leaving. He's on a ring or something like that. That's
correct.
They've got the video of him leaving, and he's shirtless, and so they said that he didn't sexually assault the mom, but based on this guy's track record, I'm not really sure about that. But regardless, they got his DNA, and then he ends up out in Maryland, and that's where he ends up attacking Rachel as she's out there on that jogging path. So Tom, I know you've done a bunch of research on this, man. Tell me fill in some of the blanks here, so catch everybody up.
Yeah, so we have the Los Angeles incident takes place. It says a violent attack on a 9-year-old girl, and we know that it had to be a crime of some substance because they were able to get DNA from it. So they threw some pretty serious forensic resources to get that CODIS profile developed so quickly and to get that into the system. So this was not just a break-in of the house over here. So we got a pretty bad actor already out in California. Then we have the Maryland, I'll call it Maryland incident, which is our murder of Rachel. By the way, let's correct the record a little bit over here. First, I pushed out that we had the trail, the Ma and Pa trail over here, and we actually, if I recall, reported it west of it. Since that time, they've expanded that trail, and it actually was in a different area on that now longer form of the Ma and Pa trail. And what we do know is just like Ranger School, Jared, he sat in wait, is what they think, attacked her, probably beat her unconscious and dragged her into a culvert pipe under, concealed location, just like a panther in the woods, how it's going to wait and attack. And he had probably planned this out, knew what she was doing. And this type of people, this is what it does for them. When I say this type of people, I'm talking about that special class of rapists that us experienced investigators have dealt with over the decades And this type of person lives for this. That's what they do. They travel from area to area, and when it starts to heat up, they get out of there. And when it heats up, they do this sort of attack and they move to another location. So when you start seeing multiple locations like we are with our guy here, so we know that we have El Salvador, Oklahoma is ultimately captured, Maryland, Texas is thrown in on the wanted bulletin that has the captured across it, by the way. That came out last night in research. And then our LA incident, that it comports nicely with exactly what these guys do. They're a special class of rapists that live for that stalker type. And if the 4, 5, 6 different types that they've had over the years, there are opportunistic, there are people that are acquaintance or date rapists. This guy is a special class because he sat and wait. And like I said, like a puma attacked her. And this could be anybody, our victim out there, just waiting and waiting and waiting. And we've got to draw the line somewhere with what we're going to allow into the country and have some sort of accountability. We can't let rapists come in here. They're a real country, I get it, but we have to have some kind of accountability. And now we've lost control. We've lost control in the United States, and we have this running around. And I think you cited 6 examples is what I see. And you know me, man, I can really rail on this. So let me come up for air for a second and give you a chance to talk on this. But this is the 2 things that I wanted to correct was the Mom Pa trail. And previously somebody had a good lead. They thought he had a cauliflower ear like he was an MMA guy. I don't see that to be the case. It was just but I like how people were thinking out there, adding to the equation of what might have happened.
Well, okay. So imagine you describe this panther like, predator behavior. So this guy is sitting there. This is probably a pretty. I'll bet if he went out and talked to the people in Maryland that live around that trail, I'll bet there's people on that trail all the time, even early in the morning, like what Rachel was. And for this guy to be as much of a stalker as he was and being out on that trail early in the morning, scumbags like this guy are usually night stalkers. They're out there late at night and then partying and stuff. And then 5 or 6 or 7 in the morning, they're sleeping. But for this guy to be out there early in the morning, when Rachel is out on her walk run, but even then, there still had to be enough people. So he probably let other, maybe there are a couple of women that go walking together. And all of the moms that are out there and all of the women. I shouldn't even talk that. I said, think about it. My wife goes out walking and she takes our dogs, fortunately. And so she always has a little bit of a protection, but in a populous area like this, people are on that trail all the time. And you think about how many of our sisters, how many of our wives or our mothers are going out and exercising like this all the time. And yet you have this guy that's basically just a predator stalking our close relatives, our close loved ones. And it just, this is just, again, another one of those things that it just sends me over the edge. I'm like, are you kidding me? This guy should have never been in the country in the first place. Yet, because of the policies of people in the Washington, D.C., that are allowing these kinds of just complete scumbags into our country in mass numbers. And that's another thing that really scares me. Think about, we have over 10 million people that have crossed our southern border in the last 3.5, 4 years. 10 million people. That's 3 times the amount of people in the entire state of Utah. And how many of those, and 2 million of them are getaways? Well, there's a special category, like you were talking about earlier, Tom, a special category of, you were talking about predators and kind of the special rapist types, but getaways are special as well. And we all need to pay attention to this, because a getaway is somebody that does not want to get caught. Right now, if somebody comes across our border, they are looking, they're actively looking for a border patrol to surrender to. Well, that's the normal people. The rest of them, the ones that do not want to get caught by border patrol, they just want to get into the country. Those are your terrorists, your rapists, your murderers, and there's 2 million of those. Think about how many people 2 million people is. There's a lot of cities in the United States, most of the cities. In fact, there's very few cities that are actually 2 million and more. I mean, what is that? I don't even think like Detroit has 2 million people in it. In fact, I know it doesn't. Nashville doesn't have 2 million people. I mean, you're talking probably, what do you think, Tom? I mean, Baltimore, maybe? Does
Yeah,
Baltimore have 2
that's
million people?
probably, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
it's a huge population. I mean, that's
it's
a
massive.
little less than 1% of the United States. A little less than one. I think we're up to 300 million. So there you go.
Yeah. Well,
There you go. So yeah.
so
Um,
yeah, 2 million people that actively did not want to get caught by the border patrol. Why? Why would you not based on today's environment, why would somebody coming across the border that actually wants to come here and be a part of the, be a US citizen and contribute and have a better life and have a better job and support their family? If that's the mantra that's going around, which is all BS in my opinion. But
yeah.
the
These
bottom line
guys
is,
and
yeah,
us investigators that just sit in their heads, and these are the ones that really change the entire community. And I write historically, and I do some film production, and we bring forth these stories. And I know police officers who have died with this in their head that they couldn't put this case down. We're clearing things. We just cleared something from the Colonial Parkway, recently. Awesome time, golden age of being able to clear these things. But these things will change a community for decades, to the point where the next generations won't even talk about it because it's just too painful to talk about. And I'm progeny from that, seeing that entire evolution of that. So
yeah,
how do we break that? Well, what these guys do, psychotic, is the blitzkrieg attacks, with seemingly make no sense at all. But this is a planned, calculating guy who dragged her back to a culvert like a cat does that. It drags her back over here. They're nefarious and they're calculating. So those getaways that you're talking about, what they're doing is they're figuring out ways that they're going to get caught. This is why it's so dangerous for a police officer being involved in a car stop, that at any given moment he doesn't know who this guy is, and then you end up with some incident where, I'm sorry, the name escapes me, but the guy's on the lam for 40 years, and they found out he died at his ex-wife's. It was buried on her property, if I recall, but he was hiding there the entire time. He killed the chief of police. That's what these guys do. They cannot be accounted for. So take specific provisions, which the public doesn't understand, to evade law enforcement scrutiny. And those databases that are out there are fingerprints. On the car, of course, is the VIN. On the car is going to be the license plate. So think about these databases that you're trying to, and that you've learned about, like an intelligence officer, to evade these sort of accountability. And then the DNA, which is what ultimately tripped them out. What else is a database that would get them? How about firearm? No, not so much. And that's not even the case over here, because we just cannot track firearms. But what other databases exist out there on these things? Well, your telephone, which is a technical surveillance measure that they used in this case to aid them, because nobody anymore has house telephones. They have that walking and living tracking device on them. So it's hard to evade that. And even if you don't have one, that's a tell for anybody who's savvy as an intelligence officer. Like, why don't you carry a phone? Why is it being turned off? That's the Achilles heel for this, which is heavily used on that. Of course, law enforcement doesn't necessarily want to talk about that, because that is giving tradecraft, that's giving information to our bad guys, who will further exploit that, and they'll become better predators, which is what this guy did. He learned very quickly how to do it. And,
yeah.
let me take a break and say kudos out to the entire team. Tulsa, police who were able to walk up on this guy in a bar and arrest him, in concert with all the other partners that were working this thing around the clock. A big thumbs up to Scott Duffy for his keen observations and getting on to Fox News. He's a colleague of mine from the Baltimore, Delaware office, where I finished up at 4 years ago, and for his insights and everything else. But the
So he was
work on
FBI
this.
ERT then?
He was a supervisor for one of the Delaware offices up that way, but he had contact with the family, with Rachel's family, and understands this stuff very well. And you can't underscore how important it is to have those contacts at both the local and the federal level, because you can bring so many resources to bear. Um,
Yeah.
at the federal level, which is it's tough to explain, but things like mail fraud, things like money laundering, very complex investigative tools. And in this case, you can get to El Salvador very quickly. You get country clearance, you get over there, and we have people on the ground, boots on the ground, that are able to run this stuff down. So it's very important to have those federal resources latched up tightly with them. That's what they did.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.